My name is Claire Harrington. I am 26 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my parents called me the difficult one, the slow one, the daughter who just didn't have what it took. While my sister Sophia collected acceptance letters from Harvard and birthday gifts like Tesla Model S plaids and designer wardrobes funded by a $13 million trust fund, I collected library cards, hand-me-down textbooks, and the quiet understanding that in the Harrington family, I was the afterthought, the invisible one, the one nobody expected anything from. But on June 14th, 2024, at the Plaza Hotel Grand Ballroom, in front of 300 of New York's most powerful people, everything changed. A silver-haired man in a grey suit walked through the crowd. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't smile. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward me, toward my table, the one near the back wall, the one near the service entrance, my table. He stopped in front of me and placed a cream envelope in my hands. My fingers froze. My heart started pounding, because somehow, deep down, I knew this wasn't just paper. This was something else, something bigger, something final. And in that moment, my entire life split into two versions. The version they believed I would live, and the version my grandmother had secretly prepared for me. But before I tell you what was inside that envelope, you need to understand something. Everyone believes family favoritism is complicated. They say parents do their best. They say time heals everything. They say blood is thicker than water. They say if you stay patient long enough, the people who dismissed you will eventually see your worth. But that isn't always true. Some families don't change because they grow. They change because they are forced to. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not fight, not scream, not demand attention. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait. Wait quietly while everyone underestimates you. Wait while they stop paying attention. Wait while they assume you are harmless, irrelevant, powerless. Because invisibility is not weakness. Invisibility is cover. My name is Claire Harrington, and I'm about to tell you how I went from sitting at a back table near the service entrance at my sister's Harvard graduation party, being publicly erased from my own family's future, to becoming the majority owner of a $78 million company my grandmother built from nothing. And before you think I got lucky, you need to understand something. My grandmother didn't leave me control because she felt sorry for me. She left it to me because she had been watching my father, watching my sister, watching everyone, watching me. The Harrington family was third-generation New York real estate. Our name was engraved on buildings across Manhattan and Brooklyn. My father, Richard Harrington, ran Harrington Developments, a company my grandmother Margaret had built from a single office in Queens in 1967. By 2000, it was worth $78 million. He didn't build it, he inherited it, and slowly over time, he began reshaping it into something she never intended. Something colder, something smaller, something built on control instead of vision. I was born with severe anxiety and a processing disorder that made traditional classroom learning almost impossible. Not because I wasn't intelligent, but because information didn't stay when it was forced into rigid structures. It stayed when I saw it in motion, when I observed people, when I understood patterns. But my parents didn't see that difference as strength. They saw it as limitation. When I was 9 years old, they hired the best specialists in Manhattan for Sophia. Private tutors, learning coaches, programs that cost more than most families earned in a year. They invested in her future like it was guaranteed. When I asked if I could have help too, my father looked at me across the breakfast table and said, "Claire, we've tried everything with you. At some point, we have to be realistic about what you're capable of." I was 9 years old, and I believed him. I believed him when he said it. I believed him when he stopped trying. I believed him when he stopped seeing me. So I stopped asking. I stopped hoping, but someone else didn't stop. Every Saturday morning, I took the subway to my grandmother Margaret's brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. She would sit with me at her kitchen table, spreading out blueprints, property maps, contracts. She didn't teach me like I was broken. She taught me like I was capable. And slowly, everything began to change. She taught me how buildings were more than steel and concrete. They were decisions, timing, leverage. She taught me how power didn't belong to the loudest person in the room. It belonged to the person who understood the room. Claire, she told me once, pushing her glasses up as she studied me carefully, your father reads a room and sees what he wants to see. You read a room and see what's actually there. That is everything. I held on to those words for years. Through every dinner where Sophia's achievements were celebrated like headlines and mine were ignored like footnotes. Through every conversation where my father introduced her as the future of Harrington Developments and introduced me when he introduced me at all as his other daughter. He thought my silence meant weakness. He thought my patience meant acceptance. He thought I had accepted my place at the back of the room. But I hadn't accepted anything. I had been learning, watching, preparing, because when people stop paying attention to you, they stop protecting themselves from you. And that is when everything becomes possible. In October 2019, something happened that changed everything. I arrived at my grandmother's brownstone early one morning and found the front door slightly open. I could hear voices inside. My father's voice, calm, controlled. And another voice I recognized as James Calloway, the company's chief financial officer. I didn't mean to listen, but I did. Margaret is 79 years old, my father said. She doesn't understand modern portfolio management. The quarterly reviews are becoming a problem. She asks too many questions. There was a pause. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. I'm proposing we restructure her shares, reduce her voting control from 51% to 15%. Frame it as estate simplification. Silence followed. Then Calloway spoke quietly. If she finds out the real reason, my father interrupted him. She won't. She trusts me. In that moment, I understood something I had never fully understood before. My father wasn't protecting her legacy. He was positioning himself to take it completely. I stepped back quietly and left before they knew I was there. But when my grandmother opened the door later and looked at me, she didn't ask what was wrong. She simply said, "You heard," and I nodded. 3 months later, she handed me a small mahogany box. It was smooth, dark, and heavier than it looked. "Keep this safe," she told me. "Don't open it yet. You'll know when." I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I took it home and placed it in the back of my closet, where it sat for 4 years and 8 months, untouched, waiting. During those years, everything continued as expected. Sophia rose higher. My father grew more powerful, and I remained invisible. But invisibility gave me something they never realized I had: access. I studied the company's public filings. I learned its structure. I observed its leadership. I built quiet relationships with people who had known my grandmother long before my father inherited her position. I wasn't competing. I was understanding. Because power isn't taken in loud moments. Power is secured in quiet ones. And eventually, the moment arrived. June 14th, 2024. The Plaza Hotel, Grand Ballroom. Crystal chandeliers reflected gold light across polished floors. A 12-piece orchestra played softly in the corner. Every powerful person in my father's world was there. Investors, executives, politicians, friends who weren't really friends. I arrived alone, wearing a simple navy dress I had bought myself. It wasn't designer, it wasn't expensive, but it was mine. My mother met me near the entrance. Her eyes scanned me once, quickly, evaluating. "You're at table 24, she said. "Near the back." She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Table 24 was partially hidden behind a massive floral arrangement. From there, I could see everything. The stage, the spotlight, my father, my sister, but nobody could see me. At 8:45 p.m., the music stopped. My father stepped onto the stage. His presence filled the room instantly. "Tonight," he announced, his voice strong and proud, "we celebrate the future." Sophia joined him, radiant, confident, everything he had ever invested in. "Upon my retirement," he continued, "Sophia Harrington will become Chief Executive Officer of Harrington Developments." Applause exploded across the room. Cameras flashed, glasses raised. And in that moment, in front of everyone, he erased me completely. I sat there quietly, my hands folded in my lap, feeling something strange settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness, something colder, something clearer, because at that exact moment, the silver-haired man began walking toward me. He moved calmly, deliberately, like someone who already knew exactly where he needed to be. He stopped beside my chair and said my name quietly, "Miss Harrington." I looked up. His face was unfamiliar, but his eyes were steady. "My name is William Foster," he said, handing me a cream business card. "I was your grandmother's attorney." My chest tightened. He reached into his jacket and removed a sealed envelope. Heavy, official, final. "She instructed me to deliver this to you personally," he said, "on the day your father publicly named Sophia as his sole successor." My hands trembled as I accepted it. "What is this?" I asked. He held my gaze. Her final will. The world around me seemed to disappear. The music, the voices, the applause. Everything faded except the weight of that envelope in my hands. "She believed," he added gently, "that this would be the moment you were ready." Then he stepped away, disappearing back into the crowd, leaving me alone with the truth my grandmother had protected for years. I couldn't open it in that room. I couldn't breathe in that room. I stood slowly and walked toward the exit. Past waiters carrying champagne, past guests celebrating a future that no longer existed the way they believed it did. I found an empty service corridor and broke the seal. My fingers shook as I unfolded the document. Legal language filled the page, dense, precise, irrevocable. I scanned it once, then again. Then I saw it. To my granddaughter, Claire Ann Harrington, I bequeath 1% of my shares in Harrington Developments, along with full voting control. 51%. Controlling interest, ownership, authority, everything. My vision blurred. My grandmother hadn't just seen me. She had chosen me, not out of sympathy, out of certainty. She had trusted me with everything my father believed I could never understand. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't powerless. I was the majority shareholder of a $78 million company. And nobody in that ballroom knew it yet. At the bottom of the will was a clause, clear, unavoidable. I had 72 hours to formally invoke my ownership rights, or the transfer would become void. 72 hours to step forward. 72 hours to decide who I was going to become. I stood there in that quiet corridor, holding the future in my hands, and realized something my grandmother had understood long before I did. This moment wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about stepping into the truth she had always seen in me. Slowly, I folded the document and placed it back inside the envelope. When I returned to the ballroom, nobody noticed me. Nobody looked at me. Nobody saw me. And for the last time in my life, that was exactly what I wanted. That night, I went home and opened the mahogany box my grandmother had given me years ago. It was exactly where I had left it, hidden in the back of my closet, waiting for a moment I hadn't understood until now. Inside was a handwritten letter, a flash drive, and a document dated 1967. My hands were steady now. I started with the letter. Her handwriting was unmistakable, precise, strong, certain. "My dearest Claire," it began, "if you are reading this, then everything has happened exactly as I expected." My throat tightened as I continued reading. She explained that she had watched my father carefully for years, watched his decisions, watched his priorities, watched the way he treated power like entitlement instead of responsibility. She wrote that leadership wasn't about intelligence alone, it was about character. And character revealed itself most clearly when someone believed nobody was watching. She had seen him clearly. And she had seen me clearly too. I picked up the flash drive next and plugged it into my laptop. There was only one file, an audio recording. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. Calm, calculated, controlled. He was discussing plans to reduce my grandmother's ownership, quietly, permanently, without her fully understanding what he was doing. My chest tightened as I listened, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't an accident. It was intention, strategy, betrayal. He hadn't inherited her company with gratitude. He had inherited it with hunger. When the recording ended, I sat there in silence, staring at the screen. My grandmother hadn't just given me power, she had given me proof. Proof of who he really was. Proof of why she had chosen me. Proof that this moment had been coming for years. The next morning, I called William Foster. He answered immediately, like he'd been expecting my call. "I'm ready," I told him. There was a pause. Then he said quietly, "Your grandmother knew you would be." He explained the process clearly. I had the legal authority to call an emergency board meeting. I had the legal authority to assert ownership. I had the legal authority to change everything. But authority alone wasn't enough. Timing mattered. Precision mattered. Strategy mattered. I spent the rest of the day preparing. Not emotionally, logically, methodically. Because this wasn't about confrontation. It was about truth. And truth, when presented properly, didn't need force. It needed clarity. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Harrington Tower, 38th floor, the same building my grandmother had built decades ago. I arrived early, earlier than anyone expected me to, earlier than anyone was prepared for. The receptionist looked confused when I gave my name. She checked her list twice before making the call upstairs. Minutes later, I was escorted into the boardroom. It was exactly how I remembered. Long table, glass walls, city skyline stretching endlessly beyond it. This room had always intimidated me before. Today, it didn't. Because this time, I wasn't there as someone's daughter. I was there as the majority owner. At first, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The document sat there between us, silent but heavier than anything else in the room. My father stared at it like it wasn't real, like it couldn't possibly exist. One of the board members, Diana Chen, reached forward and picked it up carefully. She read it once. Then again, her expression didn't show shock. It showed recognition, like she had been waiting for this moment too. "This is valid," she said quietly. Her voice carried across the room with absolute certainty. My father stood suddenly. "This is absurd," he said sharply. "This has to be some kind of mistake." But it wasn't a mistake, and deep down he knew it. William Foster stepped forward and confirmed everything. The signatures, the witnesses, the legality, the finality. There was no loophole, no escape, no argument strong enough to undo what my grandmother had done. For the first time in his life, my father wasn't the most powerful person in the room. I was. Silence filled the space between us. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that forces truth to exist, where denial used to live. My father looked at me differently now. Not like I was weak, not like I was irrelevant, but like I was something he didn't understand anymore, something he couldn't control. "What do you want?" he asked finally. The question wasn't angry, it was afraid. I thought about that question carefully, because the answer mattered, not just for him, for me, for everything that came next. "I want what she built to be protected," I said calmly. "I want it to be led with integrity, not entitlement." My voice didn't shake, my hands didn't tremble. Because this wasn't performance, this was truth. The board voted that morning, not because I demanded it, because they needed to, because leadership without trust wasn't leadership at all. One by one, they raised their hands, not in anger, not in rebellion, in decision, in clarity. When it was over, the outcome was undeniable. My father no longer had control. The position he had treated like inheritance was never his to own permanently. It had always belonged to the company, to its future, to its purpose. He left the room without speaking, without arguing, without looking back. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small watching him walk away. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, precisely. The way real change always happens. I didn't become someone else overnight. I didn't transform into the version of me they suddenly respected. I became who I had always been. The difference was, I finally saw it. Employees who had never spoken to me before began introducing themselves, not out of obligation, out of curiosity, out of respect. They didn't see me as his daughter. They saw me as her successor. One afternoon, I stood alone in my grandmother's old office, the same office where she had made decisions that shaped decades, the same office where she had believed in me long before I believed in myself. Her chair was still there, her desk, her view. I walked to the window and looked out at the city she had helped build, and for the first time I understood what she had really given me. Not wealth, not power, not control. She had given me proof. Proof that being underestimated wasn't a weakness. It was an opportunity, because when nobody sees you coming, nobody prepares for you to arrive. My father submitted his resignation 3 days later, not because I forced him to, because he understood there was nothing left to hold on to. Power built on assumption collapses the moment reality arrives. He didn't call me, he didn't argue, he simply disappeared from the position he had once believed was permanently his. And strangely, I didn't feel victory. I felt clarity. Because this had never been about defeating him. It had been about stepping into myself, about accepting the truth my grandmother had seen long before anyone else did. That I was never incapable, never broken, never less. I was simply unseen. My mother called weeks later. Her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. She didn't try to explain the past. She didn't try to justify anything. She just said she was sorry. And for the first time in my life, I believed she meant it. Not because everything was fixed, but because everything was finally honest. My sister called too. Her voice carried something unfamiliar. Not confidence, not superiority, Vulnerability. She told me she had spent her entire life becoming the person they wanted her to be, and she didn't know who she was without it. For the first time, we weren't competitors. We were just two people trying to understand ourselves. My grandmother didn't leave me 51% of her company because she pitied me. She left it to me because she trusted me. Trusted my patience, trusted my observation, trusted my character. She knew something my parents never understood. That strength doesn't always look loud. That intelligence doesn't always look traditional. That power doesn't always look obvious. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like the person everyone else overlooks. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been ignored, if you've ever been made to feel like you weren't enough, understand this. Their perception was never your limitation. It was their blindness. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation. You don't need their approval. You need clarity. Because the moment you stop waiting for them to see your worth and start building it yourself, everything changes. My name is Claire Harrington, and I was never the afterthought. I was the future they never saw coming.